I literally started to run to get the hell out of the house when my kids were little.
Oh, wow.
I remember, when I was entering my late 20s, my early 30s, and I was a mom of 3 kids, and I had totally everything that would be considered, oh, the right path. Oh, you must be so happy. You've got a great husband. And we had a house. We had 3 healthy kids. And I was depressed. I honestly think that I was depressed. And running gave me something that was my own.
Have you ever heard the phrase becoming the best version of yourself? Yeah, me too. But what does that even mean, and how do we become that person? I'm here to help you navigate through those questions and come up with actionable steps in order for you to live your best life. We've got to discover what we want. We've got to figure out a plan on how to get there, and then we have to go. We can't just sit and wait any longer. Life won't wait on us. So come join me on this constant journey to become the best version of yourself and to find your best you. I'll see you on the other side. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Nick Carrier's Best You podcast. I am stoked about today's interview. I have a marathon runner and ultra racer, Brooke Curran, with me today. And Brooke has her own foundation called RunningBrooke, which they help kids in Alexandria, Virginia, basically, or they educate teachers, right, in Alexandria, Virginia, how to get kids more active in school and keep them moving and everything like that. So an awesome foundation. But Brooke has one heck of a story. She has run a marathon in all 50 states, a marathon on all 7 continents, which is just absolutely nuts. So I'm so stoked to get into that. But also about a year ago, you had a brain aneurysm, which was a huge incident for you. And it was basically lucky to kind of come out alive and everything like that. So I'm really excited to dive deep into that story as well. But first off, just appreciate you spending the time with me today, Brooke.
Hey, I'm really glad to be here. Thanks so much for asking me to be on board. And I'm likewise stoked to be part of it. I'm happy to share whatever, sounds good to you and to your listeners and whatnot. This is going to be fun.
Awesome. Definitely will be. All right. So basically when I was doing my research on you, I was listening to you on a past podcast before, and something that definitely sparked my interest. There's another word besides interest, but I heard you were a pack-a-day smoker in high school and in college. So I kind of wanted to start there, how you were a pack-a-day smoker and kind of like how you got away from that and how maybe you got into running from there.
Sure. So grew up in Richmond, Virginia, where, and I'm not kidding, as a 4th grader, 3rd or 4th grader in the mid to late 70s, we couldn't even, we had such a rigid dress code, and I say that because it seems so ridiculous that we had such a dress code. And then they took us to Philip Morris for a tour, like literally a gaggle of 20 girls in 4th grade, all dressed up, probably patent leather shoes, get on our bus, go to Philip Morris. That's one of the largest cigarette manufacturers, and it is in my hometown of Richmond, Virginia. And I vividly remember just the cigarettes just on the conveyor belt, going into packs in the cartons. And I'm not kidding. They handed us a carton of cigarettes at the end of the tour to take home to our parents.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that ridiculous?
That is
I know.
insane.
And thinking about that now, and, of course, that was like 30 or 40 or whatever years later. And what I was like, I cannot believe that. So it was this culture. And, I remember getting permission from my parents to actually smoke on school campus at 16. And that was just what we did. It was a sense of camaraderie. And I also think that smoking gave me some salve to things that were bothering me. It was a way for me to, a way for me to kind of polish off things that were bothering me and whatnot. And so I went through, high school and college doing that. And then I got out, and then that's right when all that whole smoking thing, oh, that's bad for you, you shouldn't be doing that. And so I quit cold turkey.
Just simply because that's the thing that motivated you, knowing that it was bad?
Yeah, I was like, why am I doing this? And also, honestly, it became socially unacceptable. It became something that if you were a smoker, it's kind of like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
We can't hang out. And, it was still, while if you're on an airplane, you could still smoke. The smoking section was literally started the seat behind the non-smoking section. There was no sort of partition or whatnot. It just became socially unacceptable, and you just kind of you don't want to do anything that becomes that. And so I just decided to quit, and I did. And, I started at that point, I was out of college, I was working, met my husband, and then it's like, okay, well, we get married and we all of a sudden have 3 kids. And this is leading to my running story is, I literally started to run to get the hell out of the house when my kids were little.
Oh, wow.
And this might seem relevant to your female listeners, and maybe it's still, I'm not sure if it's still what's like today, but I remember, when I was entering my late 20s, my early 30s, and I was a mom of 3 kids, and I had totally everything that would be considered, the right path. Oh, you must be so happy. You've got a great husband. We had a house. We had 3 healthy kids. And I was depressed. I honestly think that I was depressed. And running gave me something that was my own. And it was easy. And, all I had to do was do, shoes. And I think back, and, it was honestly kind of a walk run. It's not like I was some super track star. And that's what everyone assumes, that hearing that I've done all this running now, and I've got some pretty good times in my history, and people are like, oh, you've always been a runner, Like, no, I had to learn how to run. And then when I first started running, I seriously think I was running 14-minute miles. I mean, there's no track star there, but just gave me something to own on my, own myself. It gave me, and again, this is my point too, I'm not sure if other women feel this way, but you enter the 30s, so the late 20s to 30s, and the kids and that whole thing, you become invisible. You become somebody's mom, you become somebody's spouse, and there's totally nothing wrong with that. But if you're a woman and you're happy with that, hey, more power to you. But I was like, well, that's part of me. I'm happy about all that, but I needed something that was mine. And this was
Right.
mine. I had so many people during the process say, oh, you're so, you're wasting your time. Oh, you're neglecting your family.
When you were running that much, that's what they were saying?
Yeah. And I was like, well, one, nobody was even up in my household yet. I mean, how could they possibly even think that?
Right.
Other than folks that hadn't kind of come along in this. All I knew was that it made me feel better. It gave me not only something of mine to own, but it gave me just a sense of happiness, of well-being. It made me certainly a better parent when I came home, because I honestly then was happy to be at home.
Right.
And so that was just something that running gave me. It obviously then made me, a lot happier and healthier as well. You think about it, and, after 3 kids, and you can do anything in your life until you're about 30, and then you hit about 30, and it's like, oh, yeah, my body's changing a little bit. And again, nothing really wrong with that. If you're totally down for that, I mean, what do I care? The UBU sort of thing. But that wasn't how I wanted to live my life. And so, like I said, in fact, I just ran into my running coach the other day. He was some kid, mid-20s at that point, when I'm like 10 years older than him, right, or 12, whatever, who had just bought our local running store. And this was in 2009, 11, it just happened. So it was just after that, I just signed up for my first marathon, because that's what 9/11 triggered. When 9/11 happens, people had different reactions, and mine was like, oh, I'm not sure. I was about to say a curse word,
Yeah.
For my reaction was, life is short, and I better get to this life list of things to do. And that marathon seemed like very easy, or easy in air quotes, but it seemed manageable and understandable.
Right.
Other things in my life list are like jumping out of an airplane with a parachute. Haven't done that yet. Fear of public speaking. I used to be immensely fear of public speaking. I'm just kind of checking all that off. But anyway, I remember I saw this guy that I'm talking about, Chris Farley of Pacers Running Stores in Alexandria, Virginia, the flagship store in Old Town. And we were actually both running. And I'm like, hey, Chris, and so we stopped to chat it up for a while. And I was like, you changed my life, because he gave me the tools that I needed to be successful, the easy steps. And that's what we as a nonprofit right now are doing for kids across the city, tens and tens of thousands of kids actually across the city, more active and moving, just spark that happier stuff that, got me going when I was running. And like, I'm a runner, obviously. You put me on a dance floor and it's kind of funny. You put me in a Zumba class and it's hysterical.
Yeah.
But, we don't really care how you move, just like move. And so we give easy tips to teachers, to principals, to the superintendents for the high level policy changes that can easily be made to get kids active, to the grassroots stuff by giving teachers the a perpetual calendar, let's say, about different ways you can get your kids moving in the morning and in the afternoon. We suggest every hour, but again, start small and then you grow from there.
Right. So you said that this guy, Chris Farley, gave you the tools you needed in terms of running. I may have misunderstood it, but so what did he give you in order to like?
Well, literally he gave me an easy to follow plan to get through it, to build and become a runner.
Okay.
And physically was there, doing track sessions and that sort of thing. But he also believed in me. He believed in others that were kind of part of his, I don't know, friend group, or not friend group, that's the wrong word. Part of his group of people who were way older than he was, who was, helping them go through the steps to run a marathon. But honestly, it's so much bigger than that. It's that support, and it's the belief that together we can make great things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And he banded us all together. All of us are still friends, actually. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, you said when you first started running, you got into it basically as a way to get out of the house and kind of free yourself of the real world, if you will, kind of like getting out of the depression or whatever, because it was something that was yours. So when did it kind of turn into something that you want to do a little bit more competitively?
So I'm proudly type A.
I don't know if I've ever heard anybody say that before. Proud. I mean, not that it's a bad thing, because I'm probably more type A too, but I just don't think I've ever heard anybody say.
Well, I think it's a compliment. If somebody says you're type A, you're like, yeah, I'm committed.
People who are type A take it as a compliment, I think. People who are type A are like, damn right, I'm type A.
Yeah. Well, go type A, people. So I was so mad at the time of my first marathon. Yeah, I crossed the finish line. Yeah, I did it all in one piece. But I was like, I can do that better. And so for the next, I'd say 3 or 4 years, it was all about that, being best in my age group. And at that point, I was 35, running a sub 3:10 marathon. Yeah, I did that. So it's all about that. And there's something very bonding about being on a track team, or being on a team in general. And I remember helping, having, my runner colleagues, championing me championing them, us feeding off of one another's energy and excitement and drive. And I mean, some of it is terrible, because some of it honestly is terrible and no fun. But then when you cross that finish line, or, that's, you finished your 400 or whatever it is. And you're like, oh man, that was terrible, but look at our times. Aren't we great? That sort of thing. And so I think that was a really, that's a big part of where I was at the time. And then I realized that I'd gotten, honestly, as far as I was going to get, unless I wanted to truly take it up to the next level. And I cared, but I didn't care about it that much.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I remember thinking about, okay, obviously I still love to run. Obviously I'm going to still run. But what can I do with it? Because I like to do things for a reason and for a purpose. And at that time, I was, I think, dropping a kid off of soccer practice, and had to drive through an area where, I'm a little bit embarrassed to say this, but where you sort of consider, hey, is my door locked, or where, whatnot. And so I was at a light, and I remember I was first at the light, and I remember a working poor mom in her cleaning uniform or whatnot, pushing a stroller across the street laden with shopping bags from like the ShopRite or whatever the grocery store was, or the mini mart was. And I didn't realize it, but I was staring at her, and our eyes met and locked. And I knew then that I couldn't, like I was looking for something to commit to, and I wanted every kid and every family and every person to feel the same positive benefits that I felt from being physically active. And I was in a spot to do something, and I couldn't drive away, which I'm sure I had done thousands of times before, but it's, you have these moments where something clicks and something sparks, and that was the moment. And I just knew that I could not drive away and not do anything about it and still have some respect for myself. And, and selfishly, I was looking for something to do to build and grow on my own that I could do. And so there it was. RunningBrooke was formed that day. I think that was, early March, and I think we had formed our nonprofit by late May that year. And since I didn't have any nonprofit experience, I said, well, what's going to be my shtick? What's going to get people to kind of listen or pay attention, or maybe not support, or maybe, whatever, that hook.
Yeah. So how many marathons had you run up to that point? Or like, was it
3, 4?
Wow.
I was like that normal marathon person.
Oh my gosh.
One a year, maybe twice a year, spring, fall,
Right.
And so I said, well, I'm going to do it around the marathons and whatnot. And I remember, have you ever heard of Mike Wardian?
No.
An ultra marathoner. He runs ridiculously well and ridiculous challenges, like my little 100-miler, my whole lap course on a pseudo, on a trail that for me is really tricky for him. He'd be like, he does across the Sahara Desert. He does, Western states. He does all of these immense things. He did that marathon a day in all 7 continents.
Wow.
Yeah, it's on my life list. I want to do that one. Yeah, so that's why I said, all right, I'll run a marathon on all in all 50 states. I started there first.
But like, there's more into that. There's more into that. How do you come up with like, in all 50 states, I'm going to run a marathon after having run like 3 marathons?
I don't know. It's type A. It's just the way I am. I don't know. It's like, go big or go home. Like, why do anything? And he'd be like,
I love it.
That seemed kind of hard. Like, no, the things that scare you are the things that you should run towards, not run away from. And so this scared the heck out of me. Are you kidding me? But I said, okay, I said, all right, I'm going to, so I was having coffee. Actually, it was Chris Farley of Pacers that got me together with Mike Wardian, who was just merging as this amazing distance athlete whom I'd never heard about. And I said, okay, so this is what I'm sort of thinking about, and I'm going to do it for kids in Alexandria, and I'm going to run some marathons. And he basically just said, okay, well, that's cool, but so what? Like, how often are you going to do it? And I'm like, yeah, over a couple years or so. I said, Mike, what would impress you? And he said, well, a marathon a month would impress me. And so that's where that idea was born. So it was a marathon a month covering the 50 states, the world majors, which, let's see, there were at the time 5, but they're now 6. So Boston, New York, Chicago, Berlin, London, and then like when I was halfway through, they added Tokyo. So then, of course, I had to go run Tokyo after that, which was awesome. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah. So, and then to add another layer, it's like, okay, so I'm going to run a marathon in all 7 continents in each of the 50 states. I'm going to run a marathon a month. I'm going to pay for all my own travel expenses and fees. So every dollar donated to Running Brooke would go to get kids active across Alexandria.
Okay.
And so that was in 2009. And, we're coming close to $2 million invested, in this way. And it's incredible to see the joy of the kids and the learning that, the kids get it. They're like, yeah, the blood's no longer in my butt, blood's in my brain. I'm like, you got it,
Yeah.
because they do. And it's like, oh, I got my focus. I'm not looking out the window and I'm not distracted. And then to hear principals say, oh, actually we've had fewer kids come to my office because, they were sent here for being disruptive and off task in the classroom. So all that is what still feeds and motivates me. And I now have a team of 2 others who work with me, and then a very engaged board who roll up their sleeves as well.
Very cool. Well, I want to get into a little bit of some of those races, since I can't ignore all 7 continents. That blows me away. So what was there? I've got to ask about Antarctica. Like, what a marathon on Antarctica? What's that even like?
It was.
So what was the weather? What was the temperature during that time?
So it's really interesting. We took an icebreaker across the strait there from South Africa to Antarctica itself, and it's one of the most narrow passages with all the waterways going through. And so imagine it's just like pound, 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 across. It took us, I don't quite remember. I think it was 2 days, 3 days. It was a Russian icebreaker. So it was like everything was in Russian, and an interesting group of people will get together to go do that. So after getting on the ship, after going there, you dock, and then you actually ride inflatable boats, with like an engine on the back. I forget what you kind of call that you have to hold on to. Yeah. That then take you to the island itself. And I think the weather was, gusting winds. It was sleet, snow, and rain. It went from, it wasn't like a stable temperature where, it's cold in the beginning and then it's going to get up to this and then it's going to be nice. And, I'll take my hat off. Like, no, it's like you had your hat on, you had like 3 different layers on. And so it was in between, it was among it was among scientific bases from different countries. And so we ran from like the Chilean base to, I'm kind of making this up because I don't quite remember.
The countries, right.
To say the Russian base and back. It was like a double out and back and whatnot. So that was one of the ones I ended up, I was the first female to finish that one.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's kind of cool, and
I was going to say, was that like one of the hardest ones? Or if not, what was the hardest one?
That was one of the hardest ones. I mean, that was one just to finish.
Right.
But everything about it, from the weather to the surface to just the uncertainty of the footing, all of that. But I think the hardest was the Great Wall of China. So, I mean, clearly it was built to be not easy to
So
maneuver.
you did a marathon on the Great Wall of China? Oh my gosh, I didn't even know that was a thing. That's so cool.
Yeah. So it was, I think, 2 5K segments, or maybe 3 5K segments on the wall, but then you would jump off and run through tiny villages. And, and I remember going through this tiny village, and, it was all dirt roads and all the villagers are out. And I thought I was going to go, hey, give all the kids a high five. And so I go run close, my hand out like I'm going to give a high five, not knowing that wasn't they didn't. I scared the pants off of these little kids because I don't know if they thought I was doing, but clearly high fives aren't just something that they do in their lives. And I felt bad about that. I still obviously feel bad about it because I think about it, 10 years later or whatnot. But
that's awesome. What was the hardest part about it? Like the
actually
terrain
on the
or
wall itself. So all the stairs are of different heights and different, the treads are different depths. It went from 6 inches to maybe 1.5 feet, to everything was irregular. And so there's no way to get a cadence to it. Stairs themselves were, let's say, you might have had, depending on the terrain, because it goes up and over the mountains, you would go from, maybe 50 stairs. And I think some of them were, 100 or 150. And you think about that because you're going up and you're going down. You're going up and you're going down. And there's no railings. And there's, sand and all sorts of debris that make it very easy to slip if, you land right on your ball of your foot. And that, in fact, one of my running friends, or one of the people with us, she fell, slipped, and then careened down, probably we consider it 2 or 3 flights of stairs. And I mean, clearly that pulled her out of the race because she couldn't recover. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't safe. So at that point, I'm like, I'm just walking the stairs. There's nothing. I just want to be done, to be able to finish and cross the finish line and be healthy and not break my leg or anything. So, yeah, that was great.
That's nuts.
It was great. And as I say that, I was like, oh, it was great, though.
It's a great story to be able to tell afterwards. That's for sure.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that. All right. Well, I want to get a little bit into the, your brain aneurysm story. So let's go ahead. You were getting ready to go on a run, basically at a park. And I'll just kind of let you take the story from there.
So it was March 17th of 2018. Woke up that morning. It was my first training run. So let me back up this story a little bit.
Yeah.
It was my first training run to start training for Leadville, the Leadville 100-mile trail race. And everything that I've always challenged myself to do, I've always been able to accomplish, except for this Leadville piece, where I made it 87 miles in 27 hours, and I was the first person they pulled off the course for missing the time allotments. So you have to go through each checkpoint within a certain time. And I missed the last checkpoint by 2 minutes. So I'm still trying to figure out if that bothers me or not. I mean, obviously, I'm running another 100-mile trail race, so obviously it still bothers me. And I learned a lot because I had never experienced something that I couldn't gut out. Like when you challenge yourself to a level to where your body just shuts down, there's no way you can gut something out. Okay. So I was,
So you were training to go back and do that?
Yes.
Okay.
I had signed back up for Leadville the following year. It was my first long run. I continue with my monthly marathons. It was March. My coach said, it's time for us to start those long distance trainings on the trails again. I'm like, I'm down. That morning I wake up, I feel great. Get my act together, get all my stuff together. And because it's March, I don't have to race out of the house. Like, if you're during the summertime, and I'm in Virginia, but in many parts of the country, you've got to leave at dark 100. So March is like, the high temperature is going to be, tops 60 or tops 50, So I remember kind of sleeping in a little bit late, getting on my act together, getting everything in my car. I drove down to the checkpoint of to the site where I had done all of my training the past year. And we had a terrible windstorm pass through 2 weeks before that. Tons of trees came down. So I'm thinking, the park that I had trained in before was shut down because there's so many trees down. And I'm a total rule follower when I think the rules are valid.
Yeah. Type A.
I remember thinking, now I can just park my car. Nobody'd ever know. I'm just going to get on the trail, go run what I know. And for some reason, I didn't. For some reason, I'm like, damn, park's closed. I remember idling in my car for a minute, and then I'm like, So I remembered there's, a handful of other whatevers and parks nearby. And so I typed in the only one I can remember called Fountainhead, ironically, because of the head, whatnot.
Yeah.
And so I remember, map questing my way there. I get there, I'm parking, I'm getting my act together. And I noticed 3 women that had kind of come through and they were in the middle part of their run. And I said, and they were legit, not that anyone wouldn't be a legit runner, but they had all the trail gear on, and I'm like, hey, I need to go out for 2, 3, 5 hours. I don't remember what it was. Should I go, path A, path B, path C, whatnot? And they're like, oh, hey, run with us. And normally I'm a solo runner because I have my best thoughts when I'm running. And for some reason I said, yeah, okay, sure, I'll run with you, And so, I put my vest on, I had my water bottles, and so we go out and we're kind of going through that beginning process of, what are you training for? It's just clearly we're all training for something. What are you doing? What have you run? And I just remember thinking, after about literally 5 minutes in, it's not right. My stomach started feeling upset. And this is funny because, funny and not funny, we had just eaten, my husband and I, at a restaurant where we had eaten months before, where he got food poisoning. And I finally convinced him to go back to that restaurant because it's one of my favorite restaurants. So we ate, and I was like, oh, food poisoning, damn, not me too, and then, and then it kind of gotten worse, and then a little bit worse. And then all of a sudden it was like a sledgehammer hitting my head. And I remember kneeling. I remember getting sick a couple of times. And then that's where my memory ends. And I've reconnected with these 3 women because I said to them, you guys go ahead, I'm going to be fine. Because I was worried about holding up and disrupting there, but they refused to leave me. And they're one of the first reasons why I survived. So they walked me back to the car. Of course, I don't remember. I call my husband, and that's the second miracle. He answered his phone. And I don't mean that in any whatever, but he never answered his phone. And I said, hey, something's not right. I feel, generally okay, but again, no memory of this. And he does find my friends. He, finds me about half an hour later. He says, we talked the entire time. By the time he gets there, I'm like, hey, I'm going to be fine. I can drive my car back home. And so he says, I'm driving up 95, going about 45 to 50 miles an hour, get close to home, come into the house, then get to the house. He says I fell asleep at the wheel at that last light close to the house. But anyway, I parked the car because he says I didn't want to leave it there because I was afraid it was going to get towed or it's going to be a pain, but then have to go back and go get it. All that, small stuff. We had no idea what was happening or had happened to me. But I mean, I had blood that was literally leaking into my brain. And to look at me, to talk with me, I was making sense. I had no facial droop. I had nothing that would, on the surface value, tell you that something's really wrong here. You need to get to that hospital right away. So I remember coming in, leaving all of my stuff on the floor, which again is very unusual, another unusual thing for me. I remember going over to the couch. I still will not sit on that couch and taking a 2-hour nap before waking up and saying to my husband, Chris, something's not right. And I think again, I can only speak from the female perspective, and perhaps this is, perspective from everyone, but kind of like, I can get this out. It's fine. It's this food poisoning. Yeah, I got a bad headache, but nothing Tylenol can't do. Then, after all that time went through, you have to listen to yourself, and something in my head, my body told me something was not right. And so at that point, Chris says that I told him to call the insurance company because I was afraid that we'd go to the hospital and then everything was going to be fine and we'd get like a $3,000 bill or whatever. And I do remember overhearing the woman on the phone, the doctor on call or the nurse on call and whatnot, saying, get her to the hospital now. And luckily we live close to a hospital. So we get in the car, he drives me. I remember at that point, I was throwing up a whole bunch at that point. We had grabbed the kitchen bag, still half a day's worth of trash in it, that. I just remember being in the waiting room, getting sick. And I remember scaring, I think, some boys were there. They probably had gotten, stitches or whatnot. And then they helicoptered me to, from Inova, Virginia, which is a great hospital, but to Inova, Fairfax, where they have a very large neurological department and team, where that's where I was then for the next month of my life. It was touch and go for 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. There was so much blood in my brain that had been leaking out at that point where they were pretty sure they knew what happened. They were kind of keeping me alive, but there was so much blood at that point that they couldn't find where the leak was. And so, I'm actually will text with my surgeon sometimes. So he was like, I remember he said, I was in New York the day that I got the phone call, on some sort of business or whatnot, speaker, something or another. He was like, I know what I'm doing tomorrow. And then he went in, and I don't know if you were able to see, but I've got this great scar that wraps all the way around and goes down. And my hair is now grown out to where you can't really see it, but I went in for almost a 10-hour surgery where they took, my skull apart and kind of went down and then went deep down inside. And I actually have something that it's a talisman for me. But it's a clip, and I literally have a clip like this deep in my brain, right at my stem here, that's holding everything together.
Oh my gosh.
They patched me up. I mean, I've got titanium plates in my head, so I can barely feel this.
Right. Ooh.
But on the surface, I mean, you would never know. It took me probably about 16 months. This is a fairly recent occurrence where my body mass is back to where it was. Because when I was in the hospital, I lost 30 pounds. Just the sheer inactivity.
Right.
Your muscles just melt, they atrophy. I was eating, but I mean, if there's no way to, it's crazy. I mean, and at the surface, you would have no idea, but I had to retrain my brain how to walk. because things that we learn as infants, as we're, learning how to sit, crawl into standing, that had gotten fried in my brain. And I still suffer a little bit with the toe drag, with being able to get my brain to tell my body what to do.
Yeah.
And kind of lift and elevate. So sometimes I'll trip or I'll do something. My family would probably say, "Oh, you did that beforehand," and whatnot. And that's probably a little bit true, but I notice all those things, and it's still a challenge a little bit, and it's still a challenge, and it's incredibly interesting. One, I mean, obviously, I'm incredibly grateful and thankful to be alive. I mean, I'm probably a 1% of a 1%. I wouldn't say, if you do the numbers, I shouldn't be here and alive. And my neurologists all agree that my fitness going into this enabled me to survive. I mean, obviously, it did nothing to do with the brain. Obviously, the running had nothing to do with, me getting the aneurysm. That totally false. I could have had this aneurysm in my body since my birth. Why it sprung on, St. Patty's Day in 2018, right. Who knows? But so many other things could have gone wrong. Being in that hospital bed, if I wasn't in the best health ever, being there, then heart, lung, I mean, everything could have gone wrong. Everything had the potential of going wrong. And my body was able to handle the status quo, which enabled everyone to buy enough time to figure out where is this problem and how can we fix it.
Mm-hmm. So like this did happen. I mean, geez, what, 17 months ago, probably now. What? Yeah. And you've talked about some of the struggles, but what do you think are a couple of the biggest struggles? One, like what was the biggest physical struggle and coming back from it? And then two, what was the biggest like mental struggle coming back from it?
Physically, I think I've already kind of gone through that. It was, really gaining the weight back, getting my muscle mass back. I mean, I ran the Marine Corps 6 months after having this happen, 3 months after I left the hospital. And it was, I'm trying to think, it was about my first marathon time that I was so PO'd about, so, all those years ago. So, and then, of course, still having that little bit of challenge. It's like I have to, zap my brain to say, "Hey, Brooke, pick your foot up, remember," and then I can literally think about a muscle and make it happen, make it twinge. And I had to relearn, how to do that after months of physical therapy. So, I mean, that's almost the easier thing because that's the visible stuff. That's the stuff people get. It's the inside of the head stuff that, people don't understand, or it can be frustrating. And I totally get that because it's frustrating as hell when I don't remember something.
Right.
I have years of my life that has been totally erased where I won't remember, "Oh, we saw that movie. We did that. We've already been there."
Wow.
I just don't remember. Or I'll have like a shade of a memory and, family or friends will show the picture and then it'll start kind of coming back. So, those things will polish, those memories will polish. It's really interesting because, or I think it's interesting anyway, I now think at a 30,000 foot level, which when you're building and growing something is a phenomenal thing. This vision to be able to see, and not just vision personally, but vision as to who else do we need on our team? Who else has parallel and overlapping objectives that we can work together on? Who else could benefit, or we benefit, or that proactive thinking. So in some ways, and I'm surprised I haven't said this already, it's the best, worst thing that's ever happened to me because I did not have that ability. I mean, I had vision, I had diagonal, sort of going forward.
Right.
But now I'm like, oh, I know where we're going. And that's really exciting.
Why do you think that is now that you have that after having it? Do you think it was like literally just something kind of like with your brain, or do you think it was more just kind of like because you had it, maybe you have like greater perspective in terms of like being like thankful that you're just like living, that sort of a thing? Or what do you think it is?
Well, there is a lot of that. I mean, there is a lot of that gratefulness, and I'll get into that. Sometimes I'll almost drive off the road because I'll be like, oh, look at that beautiful cloud. And they're like, oh, holy smokes, I'm driving. Or, being able to hear these, like I can hear birds' wings flapping as they're passing me. There's this light, like I literally saw the other side. I literally saw, and what scares me or what makes me elated is I wasn't scared at that. I wasn't scared to be close to death. Like it was warm.
You had that conscious thought?
Huh?
You had that conscious thought?
Yes. And I remember my family talking me out of it, or not talking me out, but realizing. And I remember choosing not to go. And I remember like, yeah, but not today. Why did I go there? So this is the bad thing. So I'm at this 30,000 foot level. I have no idea. Like I had vision before, but now it's like this global community vision of how do we do this and build something bad, like good,
Right.
And then interestingly, I go this 30,000 foot to this incredibly granular piece. What's difficult are all the steps in between where my brain can get lost. Like I'll know where I want to go. I'll have something incredibly granular to start with, but the next 3 to 5 steps can be fuzzy for me.
You mean in the sense of like because of your brain aneurysm, or just like
my brain changed the way it could think, like the way it could process things, the way it could remember things. Like this is not the same brain that I had before. I mean, and honestly, it's not. It's not only because one, it happened, but you think of everything that had to regrow, right? I mean, so much had to regrow to be back there. I mean, so it can be annoying as heck. My family or my assistant's amazing. She's a former FBI agent, and she's like detail oriented. And she's got that, okay, these are the 10 things we need to do to get from here to here. Like, great idea, Brooke. I guess because I'm her boss, she thinks that that's a great idea. And she also tells me, like, Brooke, that's a great idea for another day, But, so, it's that teamwork of, how can we build something using what you do really well, what I do really well, what a community partner does really well, so everyone can benefit from it. And that's a really exciting place to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's cool that you now have that big vision, and that was kind of something that you didn't have before. So I want to kind of stay on that sort of a topic, but outside of what you just said. But so is there anything that you do differently now, like in your life, maybe on a daily basis or like a weekly basis, that you didn't do before and you now do because of this incident?
Well, yeah, I appreciate life. It's very easy to go through the day in, the day out, the week to week, and just be like a surface dweller of life. And this best worst thing that ever happened to me makes me not only, that incredibly driven has stayed with me, but I will slow down because I really want to deep dive and understand, which probably scares the pants off some people. What makes you tick? Like why, what's your history like? What are your goals? What drives you to do what you do? I'm just incredibly interested in why people are who they are and what their past and history has happened to kind of make them that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating. Before I was like, everybody had the same experience as I did, or, it was nothing wrong with vanilla ice cream, but just a very vanilla perspective of the world. And this makes you be like, oh, wow, there's mint chocolate chip and there's strawberry and there's, grape nuts. It's like actually my favorite syrup, whatever. I went down a rabbit hole there,
Yeah.
but it really does make you want to understand people.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting. So we talked about beforehand how one of the things that you struggle with is keeping consistent, like, good mojo going on. So I want you to talk about that struggle a little bit and how you kind of work on trying to keep a good mojo going.
It's easy to get overwhelmed. And, I think all of us get overwhelmed. And if anybody says, oh, I never get overwhelmed, it's not telling you the truth.
Yeah.
But what I try to tell myself, and it seems a little bit trite, is to kind of appreciate the accomplishment so far and be okay with the fact that, okay, you didn't get to where you intended to go, but did you get part of the way? Like, did you move the ball forward a little bit? And to, appreciate that moment is how you can kind of tease out the that unhappiness of not getting to where you'd wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question? I feel like I might have not quite gotten that one.
No, I think you do. I think basically it's like you said, it's the reason that you struggle a little bit with keeping maybe a consistent good mojo is because you're always looking to basically like achieve a particular goal, and it's impossible to always be like at that achievement point. So always trying to be grateful for the progress that you've made thus far, and kind of like see the progress that you've made thus far is basically what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Good. I explained myself well. Yeah. I mean, one of the worst things about being a type A person is you're just never happy with what you've done.
Right.
Like you never appreciate, like, holy smokes. I say to you, oh, I've run 135 marathons, and not appreciating. I mean, you think it's like 54,000 steps per marathon, times that by 130, that I've been to all the continents, I've been to all the states. And I'm like, wow. Like, when I take a moment and just think about that, I'm like, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I find myself boring as hell, but I was like, yeah, it's kind of interesting,
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a good lesson. It's actually something that I've thought about. Literally, was when I was listening to a podcast, I could picture myself. I was driving out of Kroger listening to a podcast, and I had this thought of one of the things that I struggle with the most is kind of like you just talked about how you struggle with kind of keeping a good mojo. And for me, it's because like I always want to be further than where I currently am. Yeah. I always kind of wish I've already achieved a little bit more, and I'm not necessarily patient throughout the journey, but I also, in a sense, feel like I've done okay with being patient throughout the journey, simply because I do a great job of setting benchmarks for myself and writing them out. And in a sense, like the way I thought about it was like, I'm almost tricking myself in not being patient because I've achieved the benchmark. So I've achieved something. So I don't have to be patient because I achieved that, but it is allowing me to be a little bit more patient long-term because I have something to achieve along the way.
Yes. Small, measurable goals.
Mm-hmm.
Smaller benchmarks that you can cross off your list. Absolutely.
Right. So when you first started your organization, like, did you have any idea what doing a nonprofit was like? Like what, like you said, you had that moment that was like, I want to help other people get the benefits or feel the benefits of being physically active. But I just am very intrigued as to what then sparks you to doing a nonprofit when you've like had never been doing anything like that before.
Yeah. So no, I had no nonprofit experience.
Right.
I just knew I was just, knew that I was in a spot where I could do something, spot in my life, spot in my, family's life. And that piece where, and I feel almost selfish taking a claim that some people will want to give me because, what I get from it is huge. I mean, yeah, while I'm the big driver behind a lot of it, I feel that, the piece that I get from it, all of the, it's the efforts of the hard work, to build something and to see what that's going to turn out to. And while it can be, you have to think it's like you created that.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's something that because of you, and it's incredibly kind of cool to see it both, in the past, but then also think about where you're going to build that moving forward. And so to not be, I go, hey, glad I didn't mess that up. I'm glad this was a good idea. Because, you had to get a lot of, that support. I mean, I certainly wasn't the only driver to make it a success.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So after the aneurysm, have you done a couple races since the aneurysm?
Yeah. So I've since run, let's see, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. That's 8. I ran June 9, and then I ran 5 in July. I ran a marathon a day and a marathon a day for 5 days and 5 different states.
This is all since the aneurysm.
Yeah.
What? Oh my gosh. So how quickly afterwards then? You said so it was March 17th, 2018. So when was the first race after that?
It was Marine Corps. It was my first one back, and it was my first marathon, as you know, way back in the day.
Which when is that during the calendar year?
Gosh. It was 6 months later.
Were you nervous about going back into it?
Yes, but no. I mean, because honestly, running gave me my life in so many different ways that we've already talked about. It was like me returning back to what I knew brought me joy and brought me health. And it was like returning back to that gave, semblance of my life in a physical way.
Mm-hmm.
Because I could have easily been, I'm done with that. But just knowing, again, that whole mental health thing, like I had to build back to it. I couldn't not do that because I just knew that I would never be at the same happiness level that running gives me. The health reasons, and also it was something that I wanted to prove to myself. There's so many things of what I do is to either prove others wrong, but usually just to prove to myself that, that I can do that.
Or what were the first few races back like physically?
They were hard.
Yeah.
I mean, because that deep muscle endurance that, I had spent years building up was erased during that month in the hospital. And so it was like physically hard. Not that it was never easy. Don't get me wrong. It's, it's always a challenge no matter what, no matter how many times you've done something or run something will happen. Something unexpected will happen. And so, so the first, and I think that the initial one was elation. I can still do this. My brain remembers how to run this. And it was like, it felt so good to be going back to normal life and to normalcy. And I think I felt that way. And I still do feel that way. I mean, every single time that I go out for a run, that I have to remind myself, Brooke, a year ago, you weren't even running, I think, you were running again, but where are we in August? You weren't running more than an hour at a time. I mean, last weekend I had back-to-back 5-hour runs that were self-supported and, 90-degree heat. I mean, to think about, think about that, makes you realize kind of, and it's incredible what your body can do, just with a little love and a little self-care and a little belief in yourself, and taking these small steps. And even today, people are like, oh my God, how are you doing that? And how do you possibly run? It's not like I think to myself in the morning when I wake up, oh yay, I get to go run for 5 hours today. Just what I wanted to do is, my family's at home, or something I'm missing out, or I'm not going out the night before because I know I have to get up at 4 a.m. in order to beat the heat and get whatever. And it's like you just take it in small pieces. So I say to myself, just going to take it an hour at a time, or whatever it might be. And then I say to myself, Brooke, how many times have you done that? How many times have you gone out for a long run? How many times you got this? And also appreciate that feeling terrible now, other than the brain aneurysm piece. I'm going to leave that aside because that's kind of an anomaly. But, knowing that just because you feel bad now, to appreciate the badness. And that's what running taught me. And that's also what this whole aneurysm taught me, is to appreciate the badness, because the badness is going to dissipate. And once you embrace the badness in a while, that bad, this is hard, it's hot, I'm bored, my feet hurt, whatever, once you embrace that, it diminishes. One thing we haven't talked about is I have asthma and exercise-induced asthma.
What?
I have asthma and exercise-induced asthma. And I remember the feeling of, and that I had already run like 4 marathons by this point. And all of a sudden, it's that shocking feeling of not being able to breathe, and then hyperventilating. Because when your mind gets scared about what is happening to you, and it helps to know what it is, but now I'm like, that's just your asthma. Just dial it back a little bit. It's going to be okay. So instead of trying to run harder, trying to run through it, it's just that dialing back. It's appreciating what it is, that then allows your body to be like, okay, I'm cool, I got it. And it allows you to continue. And so that's another big piece that, I'm glad that came, that I was thinking about is something I wanted to share today, was appreciating the elephant in the room. Because once you identify what it is, you can figure out your way around it. And if it's an elephant, maybe going under the legs, appreciating like, hey, that's terrible. What can I do to get myself through it and around it? And it could be as easy as, 30 seconds, that appreciation to be like, oh yeah, I should do that. Or, oh yeah, this sucks, but I know it's going to go away. Or it's all, whatever you need to do to talk your way through it.
Yeah, I'm glad so ever since I started this podcast, I've gotten a little bit better and better about not interjecting and letting the person finish their thought and finish their words. And I'm really glad I did there, because I thought where you were going with that is, I thought you were going to say like embrace the badness because it makes the goodness seem that much better, but it wasn't really that. It was embrace the badness because then you're going to find a way to go through it, and your body just kind of just finds a way.
Yes.
And I never really heard it put that way before, and I thought that's absolutely fascinating.
Yes. Yes, it's amazing what your mind can do, and it's amazing how your body listens to your mind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's this. I remember one of my coaches used to say, "Start slow, finish fast." You know, because it's your body's warming up. If you start out too fast, then you're gonna, run too fast, which means then you're gonna bonk out and cross the finish line. So if you think about it in those ways, it's all about time. It's all time related. But if you think of the start slow, finish fast, or put another way, control and restraint. So you realize through controlling your mind and restraining whatever it is, that success to get around it, through it, jump over it.
Is that kind of what it is when you say, when you say to acknowledge the badness, is it kind of like taking control and like responsibility for it, and then like kind of do something about it? I'm just like fascinated about how you phrased it.
It gives you ownership and understanding and the tools. So you might not be able to do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, going back to Leadville, I got one of my downfalls was I got huge blisters on my feet. Where at mile 50, I finally stopped at an aid station where they make you pop your own blisters. I won't get into that. But then they wrapped my feet with duct tape. And if I had at mile 30, when I realized that, hey, something's up with my feet.
Yeah.
My feet aren't feeling that great. Realized, and I had we had already run through rivers and streams at that point, and I knew that wet socks, could be a turning point for the blister whole thing. So instead of me saying to myself, and this is a huge it's all learning. It's appreciating that it hurts. Then going to yourself, what can I do about that? And what I should have done, which hopefully, as I'm saying this to you, as you know, my 100-mile trail race is coming up in seriously 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Is that learning lesson of what can I do right now in order to circumvent that, to understand it, to process it, deal with it, to understand the hurt, and then be able to be like, I need to stop, give myself a 30-second breather, switch out my socks. Could be as easy as that. Or it's the whole mental piece of, I need to appreciate that I'm having an asthma attack. There's nothing I can do about it other than not add extra stress to it, slow it down a little bit so that I can get through it. Or the brain aneurysm. Okay, so what can I do about that? Well, when I was in the hospital, I was so drugged up, God knows I couldn't do anything about it other than just hang tight. But then once I got out, it's like appreciate it. Okay, so it was the best, worst thing that's ever happened to me in my life. Other than, obviously, I would not put marriage and kids in the worst, but that they're definitely one of the best. But, it's one of those things where I've got to appreciate that near death. What does that mean? I'm still here. So what am I going to do with that in my life? And I can't let that scare me.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Yeah, like you said, I think it is just kind of taking extreme ownership of kind of whatever negative situation is there, and just trying to find a way to work around it or work through it.
Right.
Well, I'm going to go down to the last couple questions here.
Okay.
And one of the questions I always ask, I always start with the age question. So how old are you currently?
51.
Okay, 51. Awesome. So 10 years down the road, inevitably, you're going to be 61, right? So what I want to ask you is, what does 61-year-old Brooke Curran look like? What are you doing? And what have you accomplished up to that point?
So running, I never, That's a really interesting question, because I always think in advance for everyone else, but I never think in advance for myself, because what I'm doing is I'm living the dream. And I say that not to be, oh, I'm living the dream, but honestly, I'm living the dream. I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing. So I hope in 10 years I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing. Um, is that, am I still running marathons? I can't imagine not, but I can't imagine, if I want to allow myself the flexibility and the freedom to, if I want to start doing, I don't know. If I want to become a gymnast or something, I
Yeah.
mean, or if I want to, it would become some sort of like senior, and I can't believe I used to use that word, but weightlifter or something. Like, it's got to be physical, because I mean, our bodies are just crying to be physical. With, organizationally with my work, I hope to spend more time with my family. I did, they were, during with all my traveling and whatnot, I mean, they did have to be self-sufficient, which is good. Taught them life skills. My kids were able to go to school knowing how to do laundry, that sort of thing, whereas some of their friends or some of the other people at school had no idea how to run a dishwasher or washing machine. But it's that I want to make sure that we've built and expanded RunningBrooke to be impactful across the U.S. In ways that, and I use the word sell in quotes, because it's really not a sell, where we don't physically have to be present to get these ideas across. Some really high level policy changes and some easy steps for teachers and students to be able to do. So much of this can be self-led. So while we're in Alexandria currently, and maybe, that's where all of our money stays, I don't know if I want to build and expand this so kids across the US, kids across the world can be beneficial from heightened movement.
Mm.
So that's where I see us organizationally. We're going through a strategic plan right now, so I don't really know exactly what that looks like, other than there's no way we're going to be scared in order to make changes, because this isn't rocket science, but sometimes it feels like it is rocket science when you're trying to convince people to move more.
Mm-hmm. Well, this isn't the last question, but one of the things I thought about was, if you had to give somebody a message who is kind of struggling to motivate themselves to move, to exercise, to be physically fit, what would you tell them in order to like help motivate themselves to just get going, just get started?
Yeah, me too. I mean, I've had that same thing. I mean, so many times people always assume that, oh, you're really excited that you were going out for a run this morning. I'm like, that's my no, I just know that the hardest part is getting your shoes on and your foot out the door and figuring out when your part of the day is. Like, some people are morning people, some people are evening people, whatever. And also, having a co-pilot, or having somebody that can, join you on this endeavor. So you've got ownership of it, and that they're counting on you, you're counting on them. That's a big motivator. And just, thinking through, it's like, my plan says I'm supposed to run 10 miles or 5 miles or 2 miles, or I can't even walk 2 miles. How do I even get started? It's that same thing. It's just getting your shoes on and getting out the door, knowing that's going to be the hardest piece. And then saying to yourself, you know what, I'm going to run to that stop sign. And when I get to that stop sign, I'm going to evaluate how I'm feeling. Can I run to the next stop sign? Do I need to walk to the next stop sign? And then when I get to that, am I going to start running again? It's that acceptance of some of it's terrible, some of it hurts, some of it's no fun, some of it's like whatever. But I have never come home from a run or finished a race and been like, oh, I'm not glad I did that. Or, boy, what a waste of my time that was.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's just, so it's just literally that mindset of, it's like when you get up, you brush your teeth, right? you make your coffee. That's me. I brush my teeth, do my asthma meds, come down, make coffee, take the dog out, feed the cats. And then I know after I feed those cats, I'm washing my hands. And, I'd already put my running clothes on because I bring my running clothes downstairs with me. And as soon as, literally I'm making my coffee and making sure my blinds are closed because I'll put my running clothes on in the kitchen. Because it's like anything that's going to hold you up, take it away.
Yeah.
So if I know I bring my clothes with me to the kitchen, I'm having a cup of coffee while I'm taking the dog out, doing the cat thing. And I know as soon as that's done, I'm going out and I'm going for a run.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's raining, some of the best runs ever in the rain. 100 degrees, run in the shade, run slower, walk. It doesn't matter. Feeling terrible, give it a mile, give it a half a mile, give it to the stop sign and then reevaluate.
I really like all the steps in terms of like bringing the clothes down, make sure the blinds are shut and everything like that, because I really think that is a lot more important than a lot of people really think, because I think as with certain habits and forming habits like that and making it part of your making it part of your day, a huge part of it is making it the least path of resistance as possible. And if you have anything that for whatever reason holds you back, takes longer or whatever, that's just another reason why maybe you shouldn't go for that run today.
Exactly.
Anything like that. And I feel like because you do all those things really well and so frequently, you set yourself up for success so well. And I feel like a lot of people set themselves up for failure so often, not really knowing that they do that
Right.
because they leave so many different paths of resistance for themselves.
Right.
It could be something as simple as like leaving your keys out so they know where they are, instead of getting ready to walk out the door and be like, oh, I don't know where my car keys are to go to the gym or go run or whatever. And then you're looking around for 5 minutes. You're like, maybe I shouldn't even go. I don't have time.
Or I only have 20 minutes now at the gym, and what the heck?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I think that's so important. Before I ask the last question, I wanted to acknowledge you, Brooke. I think a lot of the times we talked about it a little bit before we got on too, but I feel like a number of different times, maybe without you realizing it, you talked about breaking it down into the small things. I think that the biggest way that we talked about it was that in order to keep your like consistently good mojo is you got to break it down and realize and see the different kind of wins that you've made along the way. And there were a couple other times too, they're vanishing my brain right now in terms of what they were, but you kept coming back to kind of like break it down. It's the stop, go to one stop sign, then go to the next stop sign. Just break it up into the small wins to kind of motivate yourself to take action and to move forward. So I really think it's really cool that you've been able to kind of do that consistently and see that it does play such an important part of your life and keeping a good, consistent mojo.
Yeah. And also, that one thing that we didn't get to is like, sometimes you just are having a bad day. Like, it's just not my day. And just be okay with it. It's not my day. But tomorrow it's my day. But the day after that, I know it's going to be my day. Just believing in that.
Mm-hmm. Well, so how can we best support you? There's runningbrook.org is where people can go and learn more and donate and all that kind of stuff. Is there anywhere else?
Well, we'd of course love, participation through a donation where, so much of it will go right to the kids to really make a difference and change in their lives. And also the year over the year with the teachers and the trainings and the tools that we provide and they buy through, through the donor is to really make these life changes to the kids. So of course that would be amazing. Donations, sponsorships. We have great sponsorships with some really good visibility for those that are interested in that. And then just spreading the word. And becoming a doer yourself, figuring out what that thing is you want to do, and think about us and talk about us as part of perhaps what made you do and what made you keep doing. Mm-hmm. That's the only way to go.
Cool. Well, so the last question that I always ask everybody, I think that everybody is always on the constant journey of becoming the best version of yourself. I don't know if we're ever at that best version of ourselves, but I think hopefully on our last day we can think we got close enough. But I also feel like it's a very unique journey. I feel like the way that I'm going to become the best version of myself is going to be different than the way that you're going to become the best version of yourself. So what I want to ask you for you personally is if you could currently work on or do 3 things to get closer to the best version of yourself, what are those 3 things that you could currently do or currently work on?
I think for me to become my best person, it's really taking a moment to stop and appreciate how far we've come organizationally and how far personally I've grown from continuing to take the steps and working through adversity, working through setbacks, and appreciating that it's not always easy. But really thinking through, okay, that wasn't the right decision, 2 years ago or last month or yesterday. But what did I learn from it? And harnessing the power of being able to appreciate that none of us know everything, and we're all on this journey we're all on this individual journey, like you were saying. Appreciate it and also own up to your own path so what's right for me, like you're saying, isn't right for you. I think about it in terms of my kids. I don't expect the same thing from them that I expect from myself. Well, they're hard enough on themselves, so they don't need me to, remind them or be hard on them. But also just whatever you're, to appreciate where you are in your life right now. And that's something that I still think that I can grow on and live up to, is the appreciation of what life brings you and what you can bring to life and what can happen if those things are pulled together. Yeah, partnerships are cool. They're totally the way to go.
Cool. Awesome. Well, that's all we got today, Brooke. I really appreciate you taking the time with me and sharing all your story and all that great knowledge.
Well, anytime. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.